Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas. Today is the Stacks Book Club Day. Emma Copley Eisenberg, author of The Third Rainbow Girl, is back, and we're breaking down Savage Appetites by Rachel Monroe. The book is an examination of women, true crime, and obsession. There are no spoilers on today's discussion, and everything we discuss can be found in the link in the show notes. Be sure to listen to the end of the episode to hear our book club pick for July, and tune in next week to find out who our guest will be for that conversation. I promise it's a really good one. If you're looking for a way to amplify the Stacks and help me to continue making this podcast, here's what you can do. You can use the link in the show notes to shop for your books. You can subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can use the Stacks codes with our partners like Libro FM, and you can follow us on social media. If you still want to do more, you can join us over on Patreon. It's a monthly subscription that funds the show and gives you perks like our monthly virtual book club. I want to give a little shout out to some of our most recent members of the Stacks Pack. Christine Ballo, Corinne Miller, Christine, Holly Ann Walsh, Jeanette Rackle, Brooke Densmore-Williams, Nandini, Marissa Vinning, Mary Ellen Cordick, Gabrielle Jane, Suzanne, Dominique White, Megan Hyde, and Mariah Kofelt. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the Stacks. I honestly could not make the show without you. All right, let's get to it. My conversation with Emma Copley Eisenberg about Savage Appetites. All right, everybody, I am back again this week with Emma Copley Eisenberg, who is the author of The Third Rainbow Girl. Today, for the Stacks Book Club, we are talking about Savage Appetites, 4 True Stories of Women, Crime, and Obsession by Rachel Monroe. Emma, welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk about this book. You picked the book. Well, you sent me a bunch of books to choose from, and I was like, oh, I actually already have that book. Let's do it. And then I read it and thought it was great. So we always start here. What did you think of the book?
Absolutely. So I feel like this is the book that I have been waiting for in terms of the conversation about gender violence, true crime, and like the sort of cultural obsession with true crime. I felt like, as we have discussed, my book has like broadly been given the label of true crime, and it's a complicated label. And I feel like I wish that Rachel Monroe's book had come out like 2 years ago so that I had the benefit of reading it 2 years ago, because I feel like what she has to say is so prescient and important for like our current moment of thinking about crime as criminal justice writing or exploitive or, trafficking in the dead girl industrial complex or whatever it may be. And I think that she's such a good reporter and she's such a good cultural critic. And I'm just like, I stand.
Yeah. Yeah. I came to the book kind of like, I guess I'll read this like, because we're going to read it for the show.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a second to get into it, but by like I think maybe the second section, I was so excited about it. I was really interested in how and what she had to say and how she was saying it, because I think that's some of what makes the book kind of cool, is that she's talking about a lot of famous crimes or infamous crimes, but in this totally different way, are people who are not necessarily at the center. And I thought that was really cool. And I think maybe the reason the first one wasn't as interesting for me was because I didn't really know
the detective.
Yeah. I didn't really know like that woman, and I didn't really know the murders that she was making her little models of. But like when it got to be like Manson, I was like, yes, I'm interested in Sharon Tate's sister's weird stalker friend.
Totally.
Possibly partner.
Indeed. It's like a little bit gay.
Yeah.
I did feel that the detective, which, what is her first name? One of the first medical sort of forensic experts who made these amazing tiny like walnut dioramas of crimes in order to teach people about essentially like what crimes look like and how to solve them. But she calls them the nutshell studies of unexplained death, which I love so much. I think for me, it was this idea of making, like, I think so much of what Rachel Monroe's book is about is like this idea of darkness or murder mind and like this state of living in darkness, and like why do we as people like binge 12 hours of Law and Order SVU back to back, like when we're sick, like what is that pleasure there? And I feel like the detective lady was fascinating because it's that same pleasure of like literally creating these murdered like nutshells in your own life.
Right.
Like the aesthetics of doing that makes no rational sense, but serves some like deep pleasure, which I feel like she does a good job of unearthing.
Well, it's like she didn't have Law and Order to watch, so she had to like
she had to make her own.
submerge herself in the world in her own way. Yeah,
Totally.
So there will be spoilers today, but there aren't really actually, I take that back. There will not be spoilers today because there's not really anything to spoil in this book, but we are going to talk about it in depth. So if you haven't read the book and you're worried that you don't want to know anything about it, now would be a good time to turn off the episode and come back when you've read the book. But if you're sticking with us, shall we carry on? So the way that the book is kind of set up, it's 4 sections with a great introduction and a great conclusion. Part 1 is called The Detective. It's about this woman who kind of was like the mother of modern forensic
pathology.
Yeah. And like the study of forensics and the study of crime. And then part 2 is The Victim. And it's about a woman who becomes obsessed with the Sharon Tate Manson murders and positions herself right up next to that Tate family. She's just right in their shit. So part 3 is about The Defender. And it's about a woman who becomes a pen pal and then future lover of Damien Eccles, who's part of the West Memphis 3, which you would know from Paradise Lost if you're familiar, or possibly, I don't know, other ways. And then part 4 is about the killer, and it's about this woman who becomes obsessed with the Columbine killers. And that one is a total what the fuck.
What the fuck, I know.
We'll get there. Let's start off on the easier ones. We'll escalate to part 4. So I thought that the form of the book was outstanding.
Me too.
I thought setting it up this way, we know from the subtitle that it's about women, crime, and obsession. And I thought like seeing just the headers, it was going to be like, okay, we're going to meet a detective. Like we're going to meet a woman who's murdered someone. And it's like not that at all, which is just cool.
For sure. And I feel like it essentially, you know, this idea of like tell the truth but tell it slant, like she like chooses, it's more about the archetypes of those figures, right? And then she chooses a case that sort of is an interesting microcosm to look at that archetype. I feel like I especially loved the Defender one, this idea of the ways that like sort of being like the heroine or being the protector or being the redeemer becomes like as compulsive a role as martyr figure does or detective does. Like this idea of like I will save this guy really sort of took over the life of this woman, Lori, who starts out as a defense attorney and then ends up like her entire life becomes, you know, ensnared and wrapped.
Well, no, I don't think she ever becomes a defense attorney, does she?
Doesn't she start off being like
I feel like she like
volunteer
wants to. Yeah, she like wants to go to law school, but then she's like, I don't know, and she like writes to him after seeing Paradise Lost or whatever.
She's like, what can I do to like help your defense or something?
Right, and then they become pen pals, and then become like lovers,
married, right?
And then they get married. And it's a wild story, and it's wild that they're still married.
Indeed.
Like I thought that was kind of crazy because I think that there's my feelings about someone who writes to a stranger who's convicted of a crime and is basically like, I don't think you did it and I want to help you is one thing. And I think then that escalating into I'm going to devote my entire life to you without ever having met the person, I think is so wild. Like I don't have any frame of reference for that. So learning about her in this book, I was like, I'm having a hard time empathizing with this person because I don't get it. Like I don't get this.
No.
Don't you want to be free? Don't you want to go on a date? Like, don't you want to smooch someone? Like, I don't know.
In real life,
Yeah. Like, don't you want to have a conversation with someone where they can respond to you right away as opposed to waiting for the next letter to come? Don't you want to be able to have a phone call without spending thousands of dollars per call because the prison system is such a fucking nightmare and
capitalism,
such bullshit? Like I just could not wrap my mind around Lori.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like for whatever reason, I like do get it a bit.
You do.
I think I do in the sense of like, I think that the author Rachel Monroe does a really good job of showing how all these archetypes can be like huge projections that are usually so linked to the individual person's ego and own struggles. And I think that in this particular chapter about this idea of the defender, like Lori is someone who it seems like it starts out as a projection, like let me like, this isn't really about this specific person or this specific case. It's about like my sense of wanting to be someone who's on the side of right, who saves and brings justice and all of this stuff. And then somewhere along the way, it does seem like something authentic happens between the two of them,
right?
Where they start to actually engage as human beings. And so I found that like transformation from like the idea that comes out of like this true crime darkness mentality,
right,
mixing then with the real human, like made sense to me in some ways. I think I have had to like check my own like defender, like projected instincts sometimes, like the idea of like, wouldn't you want, like some people think it's like more romantic to like overcome obstacles or something,
right?
And I think there is this idea of like, it's the pleasure and the pain, right? The pain of being separated from someone you are super into, the pain of also just like not knowing, like maybe he did it, you know, like,
well, right,
like there's that always that sense of like you're skirting around the edges of a really dark relationship that like turns some people on, and unfortunately I'm not immune to that.
Right. Well, in your book, there's that great part where you're talking to the woman investigator who is with, there's another person that comes up in your book that I won't talk about too much, but the person who kind of interviews him in jail. And at the end of the book, of your book, she kind of is like, but I did have to ask. And you're like, so there was doubt, because she's like, there's no doubt. I know for sure this person did it. And then like that always is there. Even if you know, or you feel that you know, you don't really know.
You never know. And right. I think that, this person, Lori, this figure in the Defender chapter, like she was like, there's just something about him that absolutely I never questioned. But you always get that sense of like part of the like frisson, if you will, or like interest comes from like this place of like of dwelling in darkness a little bit.
Right.
It sounds like that was something in her nature, which I think partly Monroe's point in this book is like so much of that lives, you know, in all of us.
Right. There's another kind of sub part of this section about one of the murdered children. So the crime is that there's 2 little boys who are murdered, and then 3 young men, maybe they're still boys. I think they're of them
in high school.
Yeah, they're like somewhere between 16 and 18, I believe.
Yeah.
And they are arrested and prosecuted and convicted for this murder. And it's all based on this like satanic panic type thing.
Totally.
And the guy who ends up getting the harshest sentence is Damien Eccles, and he's convicted and sentenced to death.
Yeah.
And so one of the kind of subplots of this section is about one of the boys' stepfather,
right?
Who, when basically what happens is all these people become obsessed with this case because there's a lot of interesting holes, and perhaps these 3 boys didn't do it. And what they fill some of the holes in with is another person who could have done it, which is this stepfather. And turns out he didn't do it. But that was something that I thought was really interesting too, because I think that is such a true crime impulse of people who consume true crime, myself included. It's like, oh, it wasn't Adnan. It had to have been this other strange random person that's like totally fringe. And I've done all this research and I've been on subreddits and I know because Adnan was here. So he couldn't have killed, you know, and if you don't know Adnan, you don't know true crime. Just kidding. That's a Serial reference. And I feel like Serial was a lot of people's gateway into true crime in this like most recent renaissance of true crime. I think that is also part of this Lori story, is like Lori believes this, and she feels confident that Damien didn't do it and these boys didn't do it. And then how do you kind of reconcile that with, well, then who did it? And it's like, there can't be a question mark. It has to be either these people or someone else.
Yeah. I think like, that's part of what I love about the book is like this impulse to solve the crime is not the lens through which Rachel Monroe is approaching these cases. Like, right. That like an all began in the dark kind of situation. Michelle McNamara, like, Rachel is sort of one step removed, like looking at those kinds of figures and being like, right, like I think she's talking about like that it's an extremely human impulse, yes, to want to know. And like the fact that it's solving the crime is in some ways like intrinsic to this feature of wanting to know, but it's also just, it could be anything to some extent. Like it could be sort of any dark question. It doesn't have to be a murder, but the ways that like so many people who consume this genre relate to it is by this impulse to solve or correct or find the truth. And I feel like what's interesting about this book is it's more so showing and following those people who are doing that rather than trying to do it itself.
Right.
And this idea of like why it's a specialness. It's like a way that we can feel connected or alive in our own lives. That's the impulse to solve and to know. And I think Monroe, the author, is more just like, we don't know and we're never going to know.
We're never going to know.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, as someone who, we talked about this before, about your Law and Order love and obviously the work that you've done, do you feel that wanting to know, like, actually, let me frame this through myself because I think it's easier.
Go for it. Yeah.
I'm going to go the easy way. I like true crime kind of in air quotes, but I actually don't like true crime when we don't know who did it. Like, I really like the psychology of what the fuck happened here. So I prefer true crime that's about bigger social crimes. So like my personal favorite thing to read about and talk about is Jonestown, because there's not a lot of questions about what happened or like how these murders happened. It's a lot of questions about how did we get here. I'm really fascinated with Columbine because Dave Cullen's amazing book.
Yeah, I love that.
Such a good book.
Yeah.
And so like those kind of murders are the things that I think that I'm much more interested in. Whereas like the book that you wrote, also this Damien Eccles case, like there's a big question mark. There's a lot of people who think it's one thing. There's a lot of people who think it's another thing. There's probably people who think it's some other thing. Like, I don't know if you have any feelings about these two kind of different kinds of true crime. And maybe what I like isn't considered true crime because we know. Well,
I feel like I am totally with you in being really interested in that kind of a story. Certainly, I actually really loved the Sue Klebold memoir.
Oh, I haven't read it.
Yeah.
A Mother's Reckoning.
A Mother's Reckoning. That title's a little bit
It's
something.
a lot.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. But then
the cover's also, it's not a great package to me.
Not, but I like opened it for a book club that I was doing with some friends, and I was really blown away by her level of insight into, actually, I think I came to it from Andrew Solomon's book, Far from the Tree, which is about kids that are raised by families from whom they're super different. And that Andrew Solomon interviews Dylan Klebold's, one of the Columbine killers' families, and says, like, actually, I cannot find the reason here for why Dylan Klebold became, who he was. And there's become this like narrative that essentially like Eric Harris was the perpetrator and Dylan Klebold was suicidal, essentially.
Right.
And Sue Klebold's book is just about the ways that like she failed as a parent, but also the ways that like our children are sort of unknowable to us at some fundamental level,
right?
Which I don't think she lets herself off the hook for, but is extremely complicated about to what extent she might be responsible and to what extent she might not be.
Right.
So I found that super fascinating. I also loved, so actually Rachel Monroe, author of this book, has done a lot of work about Jonestown. There's a really amazing episode of You're Wrong About This podcast that Rachel Monroe is a guest on, which you should definitely check out.
Gonna check it out. Also gonna link to it, people.
Yeah. It's really good and complicated because they do a lot of work about essentially just like how did this happen, and more so about like emotional abuse and cult followings and domestic abuse. Like it's much more about these like familial questions. I feel like for my book and the stuff I like to read too, it's much less about who did it. Like to me, that really doesn't matter.
That part is kind of boring almost to me.
It is boring.
Because it's like, what does this mean? Or like, what is this saying? Which is what makes your book good, is it's like, okay, there's some options here, but it's not even really the point. The point is like all the stuff that actually did happen.
Yeah.
And your book starts with that, like, this is what's true.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, all this what if stuff is almost not, it doesn't matter.
I think I don't relate to the impulse as much of let me solve it, sort of like the subreddit and also the Michelle McNamara again, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. Like I was interested in that book because it is such a portrait of obsession. It's a portrait of someone that tanks their life and their health in pursuit of a very tangible question.
Right.
And we'll never really know like what drew her to that. I was troubled by the fact that the end of the book is reconstructed, not in her own words.
Right.
And that feels like it kind of loses the thread of this interesting voice. And so her quest to me is less interesting than the fact that she essentially like tanked her life over it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We did Billy Jensen's book on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I was pretty critical of it. I did not love it.
Chase Darkness with Me.
We did it October, I think, 2019.
Yeah.
And I think that like that whole thing, that whole like crime solving thing is yucky to me.
Me too.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't get it and I don't like it. And I think that it's super dangerous. And what we talked about on the book, but happy to talk about for the rest of my life, is how reckless it is to think that you can solve a crime and then to like dox people. And like, it's so messy and so gross. And I think a lot of it.
You never know.
And you never know. And a lot of it, like, the one thing I appreciate about what Billy Jensen does is that he tries to solve murders that are not like pretty white girls.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. But I also feel like then you're kind of trafficking in communities that you don't understand.
Yeah.
And I just, it just like, it's icky. It was icky to me.
Yeah. Complicated because, fun fact, Billy Jensen is the one who wrote the most comprehensive long form article about the case that my book is about.
Oh, wow.
Which I read at the very beginning of my research. And I was kind of like, I'm sure his reporting is good. I'm sure he's a very smart person, but I know for a fact that this narrative of what the murders were and why was so wrong. Just so disregarding of the actual community and the context.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like there's lots of pitfalls with that approach.
Well, right. It's like, I think maybe what we're both saying, definitely what I'm saying is that what I'm drawn to in true crime is not all the obvious stuff.
Totally.
And I think that, like, to me, that is what is the least interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like the who, what, where, when of the crime is like, just give me a paragraph. Just tell me what happened.
Exactly.
And then the how. I guess the why and the how is like not how did the crime go, but how did this happen?
Exactly.
Like how did we get here?
And what is it in human nature and subjectivity that allows us to get here? And I feel like this conversation that we're having, and I feel like so many conversations that exist mostly online about like what does this all mean? How did we get here? Why are we drawn to these kinds of stories? Like Rachel Monroe's book is kind of like, in my opinion, the first like intersectional feminist book that is about that exact topic. So like, I feel like it's just a really important contribution to our understanding of this moment and this time in thinking about violence. And for anyone that's interested in criminal justice and stories about violence, like this book feels like a distillation of all of these conversations that have been happening all around the internet for a long time about like, I don't like these kinds of stories. I like these kinds of stories. That isn't interesting to me, but this is interesting to me, you know, and it's more like a philosophical reckoning.
It's like cultural criticism about true crime. And it's almost like 2 degrees removed, right? Like it's not about the crime and it's not really about like the people surrounding the crime. It's like about that next level. Like the people who have like inserted themselves into the crime or into the work.
Totally.
Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books, duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind-the-scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to traceythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. The only place for me that I feel like, and I think Rachel Monroe tries, I just don't know if she's fully successful, is like when it comes to talking about like the whiteness.
Yeah.
Like I think she kind of hints at it in moments, and she acknowledges like, this is a white person, or like this is a thing that happens because this is a white person. But I feel like she kind of ignores how true crime functions.
It's like a whiteness factory.
Yeah. Like that it's like, it's not just that it's like pretty white girls who are killed, but it's like the whole thing is super white.
Yeah.
like the whole obsession part of it is super white. And I feel like while she kind of is dancing around that, I don't know that she dives in. And I think that it's like kind of missing for me, because I feel like she is so critical and so thoughtful and smart that it's lacking. And I wanted it. Like I wanted to know what she thinks about it. And I know you can't talk about everything in a book, but
no, I think that's a great question. And right, I feel like this idea of like who are the people that are consuming true crime is inextricably linked to whiteness, but also, as like you and many others who I know are like living proof of, like obviously people of color are invested in these same impulses and exploring these same questions. And I feel like I want like a companion book to this that is like by a really smart cultural critic of color, being like, these are what these stories mean to me, or these are all the ways that like, like I feel like we've gotten the debunking of like exactly like the pretty white girl victim, but I feel like I also want the debunking of like Lori, the defender lady, and like I want like a debunking of this book, if this makes sense, from like a racial analysis.
Yeah.
I feel like those would be like super amazing side by side.
Yeah.
And I hope it's coming.
I hope so too.
I think that there are writers and critics coming up that are super exciting, including Rachel Ganza, who won the Pulitzer for reporting last year. She wrote this amazing piece about Dylan Roof, the South Carolina.
In Vulture?
I believe it was for Esquire.
I can't remember. I read it. It was huge and massive.
It's huge and massive. It was stunning. I just think I think she's probably the most interesting like journalist, if you want to call her that, of our time, in the sense that and she has a book coming out which I cannot wait to read. No one.
If you guys are hearing a leaf blower in the background, I apologize. It's just
Los Angeles
Thursday. It's trash day. It just happens. Okay.
Trash everywhere. Yes, I just think that like her analysis essentially of Dylan Roof's crimes, which are super racially motivated, and also they're super racially motivated, but they also exist just in this like larger frame of human violence, but written by this super smart critic who's also a Black woman.
Yeah, I
feel like there's just so many more books that need to be written in this vein, and I want them also like live on a shelf of smartness together.
Right. Totally. I mean, that piece is really good.
And she's just, I cannot wait for her book. I keep emailing her agent being like, when is it coming? She has a book coming? Yes.
Oh.
It's a book of essays, as far as I understand it, or a collection of her long form work.
Amazing.
That's going to be amazing.
I love that. Do you remember what your intro into true crime was? Like in the vein of My Favorite Murder, which we spoke about last time.
Right.
Like, do you have a murder, an intro murder?
I think that, again, we were talking about last time that this idea of Law and Order the show was certainly it, in the sense that this idea of like the police are trying to do good, right? And like they're willing to like stretch the rules to like find the bad guy, and like it is a Law and Order like it's a rule following status quo show, in the sense that it follows the police and then it follows the prosecution. It doesn't follow the defense, right? And so I think I came of age in this time when the prosecution narrative was the right narrative.
Right.
And the more I have read and thought and existed as like a person in the world who consumes these stories, the more I'm like, what we need is the defense.
Right.
We need the show about defense attorneys, because
Right.
actually that's the show that's the most relevant now.
Right.
And I do kind of feel like writers like Rachel Gonza, like also like Rachel Monroe, whose book we're talking about, like have a sort of orientation in the minds of a defense attorney,
Right.
in a way that like so many of the stories, I don't know how old you are, I'm 32, like so many of the stories that we were given like sort of around coming of age were like the badness can be rooted out and punished, and then we are done.
Right.
And it's like, actually, I feel like now we are needing and wanting narratives that are like, what if one is not only just wrongly accused, but like, what is even a crime? Like,
Right.
what is even punishment? Like, what are, like, who's responsible for this, like, larger reckoning with
Right.
mass incarceration? Like, all of these questions
Right.
are in play in ways that I did not think it possible when I was like 12.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. Totally.
And then maybe like as an obsession murder, I think probably Columbine was it,
Yeah.
in the sense that, you know, I don't remember, 12, 11.
1999. So 20 years ago.
Yeah, I was 12. And I remember seeing it on the news, and I remember obviously feeling horror and sadness for those who had died. And I also was like, I'm a weird kid at school who like is getting bullied, and I have feelings about that too. And like this sense of like, I think I felt it was them, and it was Matthew Shepard. Yeah. Which
also 1998, I think, maybe.
Oh, good memory. And again, You're Wrong About also does an amazing Matthew Shepard episode, which is about all the ways that like it wasn't really, I mean, it was gay motivated, but it was also like class motivated.
Sure.
But I think it was Matthew Shepard, and it was Columbine being like, queerness and weirdness / depression are the things that like drive those stories. And I felt like I understand that. I'm going through that stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Those are big ones for me. I'm 33, so we're in the same world.
What was yours?
I also feel like there was a local-ish murder, Polly Klaas. She was like a little girl who had maybe like a sleepover and was abducted. And she was probably like 3 or 4 years older than me.
Wow. In LA?
I'm from Northern California. So it was in Northern California. It was in Petaluma or something like that. And then also JonBenet Ramsey was around that time. That was a big one.
Yeah.
But I was so young. I just remember being like fascinated by it and thinking like that little girl is weird because look at her like pageant outfits.
Yeah.
It was like part of it.
It's like the over-sexualization.
That was so weird. But even like as a little girl, I was like, that's a lot. That's a lot for another little girl.
Right.
You know?
You're like, something about this is wrong.
Like something feels wrong and weird. And I don't know that I knew a lot about it, but since I've become more interested in it. But then I think Columbine, Jonestown, and Manson are probably like the 3 big ones of my whole life that I've been super interested in for a long time. One of the things that Rachel Monroe talks about in this book is kind of like, why are we obsessed with true crime? It's kind of like an early question. And she says, you know, crime is at an all-time low in America, and yet true crime is like so major right now. And so, you know, like, what is that? And I don't know if she answers that question necessarily, but she kind of just throws it out there. But I do think that one of the things that she does kind of suggest is that true crime is almost like a fairy tale.
Yeah, it is.
In our culture right now, and like not happily ever after, but kind of like the Grimm brothers.
Or like a mythology.
Yeah. And I think that that's right. Like that there's something about this horrible thing happens, and then the town and the people, and there's like these archetypes, and there's the prosecutor and the defense and the judge, and, you know, there's the victims and their family, and this whole thing that we almost understand. And that's why it's like easy to have it on in the background, because it doesn't actually challenge us in any way necessarily, unless you have someone like Rachel Monroe or Dave Cullen or whoever's writing these narratives or making these programs that says that's not exactly right.
Right.
You know, and like, I think those are the stories that I become obsessed with, where there's some sort of text or something that I can latch onto where I'm like, someone has a different opinion that actually feels like not a conspiracy, but maybe they've done the research, you know?
I think too that I know that Rachel Monroe's like tagline on Twitter is the Duke of Dark Corners, and I think epigraph, the epigraph is for her mother and gratitude for her dark mind, and I feel like that really speaks to me in the sense of like maybe, and I think Monroe is suggesting this, that like maybe part of the true crime obsession is like it's human, like we all have these we all have rage, we all have anger, we all have revenge, we all have judgment, and like that true crime provides like an interesting microcosm to examine that material in a way that feels universal. And I think that it's especially, I think, for like women, queer people, people of color who are like often seeing these like sort of objectively smaller but violence, you know, happening to at all times, that it's like how like I want to go and explore my feelings of like oppression, anger, violence, but in a way that like feels bigger than my own experience or feels more tangible. And I feel like she does a good job of pulling out like the ways that like emotional truths can feel on par with these kinds of violent truths, even if they're not the same. That's one reason perhaps why like we are like Lori, the defender in this episode or in this chapter, like it has her own feelings of like exclusion, repression, wrongful sort of judgment of her, and she's able to like essentially like co-opt and take over this experience of being literally wrongly convicted for being weird. That's like essentially what happened to Damien Eccles, and it's just like so many of these stories I think are just dark environments, like dark petri dishes for us to sort of go in and examine, and I feel like that's definitely like speaks to perhaps my interest more so than like whodunit. And it's like it's a safe for us to be in those spaces, like it's allowed, like we're allowed totally. And like the crime con conference, that's something that I'm not interested in. Interesting. I don't know if I would want to go to crime con. No, and I feel like there's this part at the very end, like I feel like it's really hard to stick the ending in a book, you know, and I don't know that I always succeed, but I felt like this ending really stuck for me because she talks about going to crime con, this like in many ways it's just like a strange project of like literally the true crime industrial complex where people pay all this money and they stay in hotels, and it's like a movie or like an expo with like literal like products where you can buy things. And it's just like the creepiest parts of true crime. And she talks about this like thing that you pay for where women mostly, but anyone can go in and they get blindfolded and are like sort of told that all these terrible things are happening. And the last it's essentially the end of this book is like her saying like I don't have to live in this narrative anymore, like I don't have to choose I don't have to choose this. And she just says like my hands were still in the air, my arms burning. How long was I going to be trapped inside this terrible narrative? But I wasn't trapped. I was just pretending that I was. Then even though the torture story wasn't over, I lowered my hands and pulled my blindfold off. And I feel like that's like maybe what I appreciate about this book as well, is just that it's like sort of saying to us like this is a dark petri dish of our own making, and like you can choose how to engage with it. Which sounds like, you know, you do a lot in the kinds of things you choose or choose not to engage with. Okay. We have to talk about part 2 and part 4. Okay, great. Because they're both so freaking crazy. Weird, yes. So let's start with part 2 because it's the less crazy of the two, I think. So if you're not familiar with Charles Manson and the Manson murders, I am. Lucky for you. I know all about it. It happened in August 1969 here in Los Angeles. Anyways, this one is about the victim. And while the story is the less crazy of the two, I think what she has to say about victim is the most interesting stuff she talks about in the whole book, in my opinion. But basically, there's a woman who becomes who moves into the pool house of the Cielo Drive house, which is where Sharon Tate and 3 others were murdered by Charles Manson's followers. And then she somehow moves into the big house, and she becomes friends with this guy who's like very into Sharon Tate, like birtherism, whatever. Like he's like a truther. And then she basically gets a hold of these pictures that allow her to leave that guy behind and go directly to the Tate family and kind of be like, I have these pictures of Sharon. I don't know if you've seen them before. Like, I really am interested in her, and like, I want to give this to you guys. And she kind of like does a weird, I don't even know. It's a fucking weird, she positions herself in a weird way. And somehow one of Sharon's sisters, her younger sister, like takes her in and they become friends. And then this section is all about this woman who's obsessed with Sharon Tate's murder and getting close to the Tate family. I don't even have words for it. I don't even know what to say about her because I think it's like she's like a leech of this story. She becomes like obsessed with it and she wants to like consume it and be close to it. And so
in addition to this, so Sharon Tate's mother becomes kind of a victim's rights advocate.
Yeah.
And this is happening prior to this woman becoming close to the family. Sharon Tate's mother dies. Then Sharon Tate's sister, who does become close with this woman, she kind of takes on the mantle of this victim advocacy, victims
stuff.
Yeah, victims' family stuff. And so that's also going on in this chapter. And that's the stuff that I think is super interesting. But this woman, this, I don't know, obsessive woman, she then takes on the mantle of being like the mouthpiece of the Tate family eventually. So like she's going on MSNBC and talking about like her family. Like she's almost like
replaced them.
Yeah, she's like replaced them, and she's the one who's advocating for the family. It's like, but she doesn't do it as like a hired publicist. She does it as like friend of the family, even though she wasn't friend of the family until she made herself friend of the family. Like she wasn't their friend in 1969. I mean,
no, for sure. I feel like that one is fascinating because it's like, I'm very interested in the victims' rights movement. And I know, again, from Rachel Monroe's other work that she's done a lot more writing about victims' rights and the ways that it's like, of course, like when you hear the phrase like victims' rights, you're like, that sounds good.
Right.
You're like, that's nice. Victims should have rights. But actually it has resulted in like this massive increase in like minimum sentencing and like just a diminishment of like truth and rights for defendants.
Right.
And that like that sort of strange contradiction of like Sharon Tate obviously died in this horrible fashion, and like there's a certain true like important way that we want to honor that, preserve her memory, etc. But then the way it ends up getting co-opted is this way that just like wreaks more harm on everybody,
right.
Which I feel like is again this it's a microcosm of the whole book in some ways of just like the ways that we try to like learn can become actually like super harmful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I know Rachel Monroe says in the book, kind of our feelings about victim statements says a lot about society as a whole. And for those of you who don't know what like a victim statement is, it's basically when during sentencing, when a family member stands up and says, you know, I'm the mother of Sharon Tate, X, Y, and Z, I feel that these people should be sentenced in this way. And they suggest their opinions. And we've seen sometimes it can be really harsh, and then sometimes it can be really lenient. And I myself, as someone who is a very intense rule lover and rule follower, I actually hate these because I think that if the law says this is what this punishment is for this crime, if that's what we've agreed on, though we don't actually agree, but like if that's what the rule is, I think that it's not fair to have someone who's emotionally connected be able to sway what the rule is one way or the other. Like I think if the crime is sentence 5 years and then I come up and say, I don't want that person to serve 5 years because they stole from my brother or whatever, I don't think that that's any better than me coming and saying, I want that person to be sentenced for 15 years because they stole from my brother. I think that like that if the government wants to be involved in punishing people, then the government needs to own that. And if not, then I think, great, we can have a society where we allow, you know, family members to punish people, but I don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think a judge should be able to say, this is the rule, but also this emotional person who's totally involved and not like and totally biased is going to tell me, and I'm going to take that into account.
It's an extremely flawed system. Like I completely hear what you're saying. I think, I don't know, when you were talking, it also just the Stanford rape
1,000%
case came to mind. And did you read Know My Name?
I have not read it yet.
That's another one I am interested in reading.
I'm interested in it too. I've heard it's amazing.
Yeah, we'll have to stay in touch and read it. But but I think that this idea of like as I understand it, that her victim's rights her statement at sentencing was a way to be like, I don't know that this will affect the sentence. Like there's in a way, it's like this other realm apart from legal truth, which is like the emotional damage that someone's actions have inflicted. That's interesting. That idea of like, I just feel like we so rarely have actual punishments that are rightly fitting the crime. Like it's all just like a horrible shit show.
Yeah. I mean, I also want to just say that like, most of you know this already, but I'm pretty much anti like all forms of extreme punishment for people. But I just think that like you can't expect, if you're going to allow bias in, then what the fuck are we doing here? You know? And like, if you're not, then you're not. But it's like, it's unfair because in the Stanford rape case, like the judge then can say, well, you know, she said I should be lenient, so I was really lenient. It's like, well, is that really what she said? And also, why does it matter what she says if this is the crime and this is the punishment? Like, that's just my...
I know. It just feels like, so much of like these kinds of complicated books, like just teach me over and over again that like, there's like nobody home in the legal system. It's like mom and dad are like out getting drunk and like we're all just like, fuck, what are we doing here? Like assign some sentences. We don't really know. Like it's all just like this horrible.
It's a total mess.
Yes.
And I just think, the other thing in this section that I found super interesting was about like everyone's a victim. And like, that's how we kind of got here with these like extreme punishments and like the, you know, the crime, all the tough on crime, war on crime, racist bullshit, is that you potentially could be a victim, Emma, or I could be a victim. Though no one would care. But like, you know, that at any moment you are in danger, like just walking down the street.
Exactly.
And now we've gotten to a place, I mean, I live in LA where there is a huge homelessness problem, but where there's people who are upset with homeless people for being in public spaces. It's like, wait. No, that's a public space. Like anybody can be in a library. You can't get mad that someone is homeless and they're in the library. Like, actually go fuck yourself. But like that the idea behind that is like, oh, I'm in danger in the library because this person I don't know doesn't like, it's spun out so far and it can be justified. You know, it's like the stand your ground is now on this idea of being afraid. Like even men with guns now can be afraid. Right.
It's like this fear-based mentality rather than a healing-based mentality of like, right. And again, as we've been discussing, like the people that the victims' rights movement is designed for are not the people that are dying as victims of crimes, like in proportionate numbers. Like victims' rights is a very like appealing to this idea of like white women are under siege, middle-class white people are under siege. Like there's nothing in it that is designed for like people on the fringes of society who are the most vulnerable to crime.
She even says, I think in this section, that a third of male homicides are by strangers and only 10% of female homicides are by strangers. And like, but this idea that a boogeyman is going to come get you and kill you and you're a poor white woman and what will happen? I mean, not poor, but like, woe is me.
Yes.
I just think it's fascinating. The last section, the killer.
Oh gosh, yes.
Okay, so this one is about these two young-ish people, 20s, who are on like 4chan.
I'm really bad at all of the.
I bet too. It's like it's a chat room, Tumblr, I don't know, some shit, and they're talking about like their obsession with like the aesthetic of Columbine and like Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris as like heroes,
anti-heroes, sexy figures,
like sympathetic people, and that they become obsessed with them, and it's like all these memes about like and like being in love with them and like having crushes on them, and the idea of like murderers as celebrities, and then these two people connect. A young man, a young woman, they connect over it, and they decide that they're gonna do their own mass shooting in Canada, and it's about like how that happens and then kind of what happens with their attempt to actually like follow through, because a lot of like these chat rooms are a lot of talk and no action, and these people are like, no, we're really going to do it. And and you know, the guy lives in Canada, the woman's flying there, it gets intercepted, you know, thankfully, but it's about like the obsession with the killers
as like sort of sexy, interesting, compelling figures, which we've also seen with like the Ted Bundy documentary that came out recently.
I mean, we see it all the time with these murderers. I mean, even Charles Manson kind of falls in that. And even if it's not necessarily like, oh, I want to have a relationship with that person, there is like a sex appeal about them or like a rock star quality to them. Like Jim Jones also kind of falls in that. These cult leaders, David Koresh in the Waco. He's like these like almost religious like figures that people follow and become obsessed with, or just like serial killers that we know so much about them, like so much information about these people and so little information about the victims. And you know, now there's a movement to like not say the killer's names.
Right.
But even still.
And I think too, there's a part that I think that Monroe does it well in this book, and sort of reminding us that like actual evil is really boring.
Yes.
Like evil is mundane. It's sadness. Usually it's trauma accrued over many slow years,
right.
you know,
right.
and that what we're talking about when we talk about these like exciting killer stories is often like a very calcified narrative of something that's much more boring. And I find that like a helpful reminder, but that like, I find the figure of Lindsay, like the girl who becomes enmeshed in this case, like really fascinating. And like, I think what they initially bond over is loneliness, right? It's just this feeling of like, I am different. And like we are gravitating towards the figures of the Columbine shooters as outcasts.
Right.
And there's something about the way like the outcast murderer figures get collapsed into one, and you're like, well, there's actually lots of ways to be like a sad outsider that don't involve obsession with murder, but like it's an easy slide between those lines, which I think is a true thing about humans.
Yeah. And she talks about also like how it's a way to get notoriety.
Yeah.
And like that these
and purpose.
These people who become obsessed with these murders feel like, oh, if I can do this, if I can replicate something like this, then people will know about me and people will care about me and I will have purpose and I will be somebody. And I almost feel like when these things happen and people talk about it in that way, I always am like, that's dumb. Nobody's doing it to become somebody. And then in reading this, I was like, whoa, maybe there is some truth to that idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you that I always have this knee-jerk reaction of like, no one's that calculated.
Right.
But it did seem like both of the, I think also like mental illness is important to mention in this chapter, like both of these people that bond and then plot this crime together seem extremely suffering from, you know, a lot of mental illness, and whether it's depression or anxiety or bipolar, like we're not really sure. But, and obviously like, many folks suffering from those illnesses do not plot murders, but it seems like there's something in this idea of like notoriety that also has to do with like feeling lost and like self-hatred and the sense of just like, why am I alive? Like there's a suicidality that like comes back around, and that's like sort of been the narrative with, as we were discussing, like with Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, is like Eric Harris was a murderer and Dylan Klebold was a depressive. Right. That's like been the sort of new telling. And I think that this chapter complicates that a little bit, because both of the people who are plotting this crime seem actually quite actively interested in harm and harming other people. Right. And again, it's just like that both end of like, you're suffering, you want this way out, and also like maybe your evil is real.
Right. Right. Yeah. The other part of this that she does mention, which I thought I would have read a whole another chapter on it, and maybe this will be in our conversation book that Rachel Gonzo will write for us. Yes. But she talks about how the Virginia Tech shooter is like one of the only ones who doesn't have a huge following on these like message boards and stuff. And for those of you who don't know, he was Asian. And so the question is like, I mean, it's not even really a question. The answer is there's a reason why, and it's because he's not white. And like that there's a lot of like white supremacy wrapped up in these mass shootings. Yeah. Which I think is like talked about a lot, at least in my sphere on Twitter. And like, I think it's talked a little bit about on like mainstream media when these events happen, that it's like, it's almost always straight, white, cis men. Dudes. Like we're not getting a bunch of like, I don't know, queer women or, you know, Latino men, or like, you know, there are a handful of people who break the mold, but like overwhelmingly, this is a sickness that afflicts. Maybe it's not even a sickness. I shouldn't say that, because it's not. It is, but it's not. Like it's something that is a deliberate action by white men almost exclusively, and sometimes other people, you know, dabble in it. But I think that like the glorification of it also appears to be a very white thing.
Yes, I think that's like 100% true. And like, I wonder if it also has to do with this idea of projection, which is like so much trafficked on in this book. It's like, again, like who can we, what stories feel like open for the taking by like the masses? And I feel like, I wonder if like, again, her talking about whiteness as the driving force for so much of consumption of these cases, that like there is like a a projection barrier there between like your average like true crime obsessed like white lady and a person of color who's doing these crimes. Like, yeah, I think that the Virginia Tech murder had so much racism in its coverage of the murders too, in the sense of like he was depicted as like a sort of maniacal and kind of like he was pathologized in a way that I feel like certainly like the Columbine killers were given a lot more humanity.
Yeah. And weirdly they were given a lot of edits, I felt like. Yeah. Like when it all first started, Columbine was a totally different story than the story we now tell about Columbine.
It's true.
Which is probably correct. Like the story that we're telling now is probably more accurate, but just the idea that you get a rewrite.
You get to revise, yeah.
Like so many of these things, there is no revision. It's like whatever the narrative was is the narrative. And I think a lot of that probably is attributed to Dave Cullen's book.
Yeah.
Because I think that was like a huge thing that people talked about and read and, you know, paid attention to. But that idea that you even get a second chance as like a mass killer is can only ever have been afforded to white men. Like that's not happening.
For sure. I love that, the idea that like who gets to have their story revised and complicated.
Yeah.
Whereas who gets their story just told one time in a shitty way.
And everyone moves on. I think unless there's anything else, is there anything else you want to talk about from this book?
I mean, I was interested. I reread the New York Times review before I came over here, and it was like talking about it was extremely positive, but the only like dig that the writer got in was about Rachel Monroe including her own sort of story, like her own frame narrative onto it. And I was kind of wondering what you thought about that. I feel like, again, I'm always interested in mixing forms, and I'm always interested in people making apparent their own interest in the subject matter. But what did you think about the more like memoir parts?
I didn't think it needed it.
Really?
I don't, unlike in your book where I feel like there's a lot of parts of your book that are new information for me as a reader. Like I didn't know anything about West Virginia. I don't know that I would have understood why you, a person from New York who lives in Philadelphia, was interested in this story if I didn't know a little bit more about you in the book. I don't feel like what she was talking about needed her.
Interesting.
It didn't take away necessarily, but I don't know that it added a layer that I needed.
Yeah.
Because it felt like the added layer was the people that she was putting in conversation with the crimes.
I feel like it's interesting though, because she's sort of the demographic that are supposed to be consuming this hook, line, and sinker, you know, as like a white lady and, you know, sort of like marriageable age.
Right. Sure.
And I think the criticism of CrimeCon and like putting one's own body in this environment up against all these other people who are consuming the genre in an uncomplicated way it was a helpful like sort of entryway into the book of like, I should like this, and I do in some ways, and also like I feel bad about it.
Right.
That was kind of like an interesting framing to me, and I always wonder. I think it often is like a criticism that gets leveled at women of like, why do you have to put yourself in the book?
Right.
And you're like, well, I too am a person.
Right. Agreed. And I feel like also women often feel like they have to put themselves in the book so that they can be taken seriously.
Interesting.
Right. Like that they're not an authority on this subject unless they explain why they are. Right. Like where men will be like, I'm going to write about this random thing that I know nothing about. And people are like, wow, the expert on. And you're like, what do you mean? So yeah, I'm like one of those people that thinks every movie should be 90 minutes and every book should be like 100 pages because I'm just like one of those people. And so I often feel like when I am evaluating a book, I'm like, oh, did we need this? And so like, I don't know that it took away from the book, but I don't know that it added value, where I feel like your existence in your book added value because of your experience in the place. Like if you were like, oh, I lived in this other part of West Virginia that's totally unrelated, I would be like, okay, we don't need this.
Right.
But like you were like, I'm in this county, like driving on this road.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, okay, I get it.
Fair enough. I love the idea of books all being like 100 pages. Like I wonder if we could create like a list of like top 10 books that you can read in like an afternoon. And I actually am very into this idea of like slender books these days.
Yeah.
I feel like most novels could be 100 pages shorter.
I really think like 200 pages for a novel is like, that's it. Like if you're over 250, you've really got to have me.
I'm fatigued.
Nonfiction, I can do more, but fiction, I mean, listeners know that I'm not wild about fiction anyways, but if it's 3 something, you've got to be you got to be doing something major.
Earned it.
Yeah, because otherwise I'm like,
yes.
Gotta go. Sorry.
Very fair. I like it. I feel like especially from like other writers, I'm like, there's no need for this. There's just like there's a sense of like prestige in writing a like doorstopper book sometimes that I'm like, this is constructed.
But I don't need all that. You could have done it earlier. You could have done it quicker. You could have done less of it, whatever it is. Okay. Last thing we always talk about is the title and the cover. So the title is Savage Appetites: 4 True Stories of Women, Crime, and Obsession. And then on the cover, it's like a dark cover and there's a doll that has been murdered and covered in blood on the ground. And it's one of the nut dolls.
Yes.
What do you think?
I love this idea of appetite that's in the title. This idea, again, it's there's some sort of explicating and exploring of what that word is and why it's important in the book, of just this idea of hunger. I feel like hunger is a thing that we don't have control over. It's like this sort of longing or this way that we want to just like literally eat and consume things like for our own survival or for our own expansion or whatever it might be. So I like this idea. I like the title a lot, Savage Appetites. I know from my own subtitle journey that the subtitle can be a battle and is often more so about like marketing and what they want. I feel like oftentimes I could do without a subtitle on books like this. I feel like as this one goes, I'm fine with it. I feel like Savage Appetites is really the star. Yeah. And the subtitle, you're like,
agreed. Sure. I like that it says Women, Crime, and Obsession because I feel like that is definitely the book. Yeah. Like it feels like
obsession
it's the book.
Is a helpful word.
Yeah. And I think even in the book, there's a part where she mentions those 3 words together in a sentence. So it feels like the subtitle doesn't feel like it was put upon her.
Agree.
Like it felt like organic to the book, which I liked. The cover I like, but it's not really... I don't know that it would make me pick up the book. Once I opened it and I saw that it was like part of those like dioramas. Right. I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense. But I don't know if the cover like did anything major for me.
Fair enough. I think that it's like because it doesn't look like a real person. Right. Which I find useful. Like it's clearly like a doll with like this like warped hand and it looks old and looks kind of like fucked up. Right. In this way that like if it was like a stylized like dead lady in the cover, I'd be like, oh God, absolutely not. Right. But there's something about the fact that it's a doll and it's it just looks old. Yeah. And it looks like a little bit off in this way that I feel like I'm drawn to true crime stories that are a little bit off rather than that like sort of like, as we know, like perfect dead lady on the cover.
That's a good point.
So I was kind of just like, interesting. What is off about this? I'm intrigued. But also like creepy dolls, not for everyone. Yeah.
Acquired taste.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it for today. Emma, thank you so much for being here.
What a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we will see you guys in the stacks. Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to Emma Copley Eisenberg for being our guest. Our July pick for the Stacks Book Club is Breathe by Imani Perry. We will discuss this book on July 29th. Be sure to tune in next week to find out who our guest will be for the discussion. Find everything we talked about on today's show in the link in the show notes. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter, and check out the website, thestackspodcast.com. To join the Stacks Pack and help support this show, go to patreon.com/thestacks. Make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts, please rate and review this show. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tigirigis. This show was created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.